So the September season of Marvel Snap cards have been officially revealed, and I think it's going to be one of the strongest seasons we've had in a while. We're also getting a new keyword. We're getting old cards updated to use the new keyword. So we have a lot to talk about in this video. We're going to talk about each card in detail. We're going to run through Activate and what that means. We're going to rate these all from 1 to 4 stars, kind of giving my guess on which are going to be the most impactful. Spoiler alert, I think they're all going to be impactful this month. I think every card is actually so good. And let's just dive into it here, kicking things off with Symbiote Spider-Man and the new keyword Activate. And with Activate, it's kind of like an on-reveal ability, but you get to choose when it happens. And let's talk about that in the context of Symbiote Spider-Man. You play this card down on turn 4. You can't use your Activate ability the same turn you play the card. You have to wait for it to flip over, fully resolve. Then, for instance, here coming into turn 5, that's when you can first activate. And to activate the ability, what you do is tap and hold on the card. And I'll try to bring up the animation of how this works. That's going to queue up your Activate. And importantly, it follows your play order sequencing. So on turn 5, for instance, if you wanted to, say, merge with a white tiger, you would need to play the white tiger first, then hit the Activate button so that you know when you go into resolve your turn 5, the white tiger will reveal first, and then your Symbiote Spider-Man will choose to activate, thereby merging with your white tiger, copying its on reveal so that you get another 8 power tiger sent. If you did it in the other order, if you activated first and then played your white tiger onto the board, Symbiote Spider-Man would not see the white tiger. The Activate would essentially be wasted. That is really nice because it lets you sequence out your plays as you want, and basically, creates a lot of opportunity. For instance, if for some reason you wanted to play a yellow jacket on the same turn, you can save that yellow jacket to last. So white tiger, activate yellow jacket. If you do that, Symbiote Spider-Man won't see the yellow jacket because it hasn't been played yet. It's following that order. So Activate doesn't happen all at once at the beginning or all at once at the end. It follows your normal play order, which is definitely a good thing for this keyword. It's also noteworthy Activate is a one-time thing. You can't use this multiple times. Once you've used it up, of course, it is gone. And Activate also, it's noteworthy that if you play an Activate card on turn 6, you've basically wasted the Activate. So let's say you top deck Symbiote Spider-Man on turn 6 and you want to just play a 4/6 body, you're not going to have any chance to activate because obviously it won't fully resolve. You won't have that turn 7 that you need to do it. Obviously Magic could create that opportunity, but in a normal game, it would be too late. So Activate cards kind of have to be played down on turn 5 if you want to use them. You could use the Activate itself on turn 6. It's just that the card has to be played by turn 5, which does sometimes limit their utility. They might just be kind of dead stats in hand in some cases. But so far, I will say the Activate cards have pretty solid base stat lines. It may not be ideal, but maybe sometimes you'll be okay just because you have a decent stat you want to weave in or whatever. So all of that said, for Symbiote Spider-Man himself, I think this is really strong. He's a 4/6 Activate, merge your lowest cost card here with this. Copy its text like it just revealed. Like we talked about with that white tiger example, this lets you do things like copy on reveal effects for a second time, sort of like a preemptive Absorbing Man. An Absorbing Man has to follow the card and it has to be exactly in sequence right after the card. The great thing about Symbiote Spider-Man, and I would argue the Activate keyword in general, is that you can load it up ahead of time and then save it for something later. For instance, play Symbiote Spider-Man on turn 4. Yeah, I don't have anything good on turn 5 I want to copy, but on turn 6 I have a Doctor Doom. Well, you can play Doctor Doom next to your Symbiote Spider-Man, then activate Symbiote Spider-Man and just copy the Doctor Doom ability. So then you basically get a 4-cost Doctor Doom plus. It's actually even a little bit bigger in this case. So, it does have to be the lowest cost card. In that case, you wouldn't have the ability to have anything else in that location, but you can still imagine some crazy lines like Symbiote Spider-Man into Sandman into Doctor Doom. That is a crazy finisher for a Sandman ramp deck. You kind of do that now with Odin and Doom, but this is a different look that doesn't require you to even run an Electro necessarily. You can just kind of play it on curve and still hit that crazy line. We already talked about White Tiger, even stuff like, I don't know, Silver Surfer. Like maybe you put this in a Silver Surfer deck because, you know, right now if you want to play Surfer into Absorbing Man, that's something you have to enable like via turn 7 with Magic or maybe via a Sarah discount. But in this case, you could actually load up the Symbiote Spider-Man on 4, still play your Surfer on 6. It does again need to be the lowest cost card in that location, so any other 3-drop you had there might disrupt you, but you could kind of focus on the other 2 lanes and still set up for that double Surfer effect. And you know, you could still have Absorbing Man in that deck too if you needed it as a backup or whatever for your broods, but it just creates a different line and a different possibility. Then there's also the stat scaling side of things with Symbiote Spider-Man, cards that just want the merged stats, kind of like we look at stuff like Hulkbuster right now. So, you know, the stuff like Deadpool of the world. I will say with cards like Dakin and Beta Ray Bill, those also do scale and have on reveals you might want to duplicate, but keep in mind for those that the buffed scaling on those, like the hammer for Beta Ray Bill, it doubles the stats of Beta Ray Bill, but you won't actually have a Beta Ray Bill. You'll have a Symbiote Spider-Man. So those probably aren't actually good targets for your Symbiote Spider-Man, but stuff like Deadpool might actually work really well for Symbiote Spider-Man. It's just another way to get those big stats if you have room to kind of weave this into a destroyed deck. But in essence, this is just like a solid statted body that lets you copy, you know, potentially really powerful on reveals, and it lets you do it at timing windows that are favorable for you and perhaps unpredictable for the opponent. So I do think there will be some really specific decks built around this. I was actually thinking about something cool with like Shuri into Symbiote Spider-Man into Heimdall. Like you get an 18 power Heimdall that shifts these over a spot. There might be something cool there. That Sandman example is kind of insane, I think. So those specific use cases, but maybe decks just run this generally too if they have any good on reveals. Just like a random 3-cost on reveal that you care about at all. Like this is a solid way to just duplicate that with a good kind of base stat line as well. So ultimately, I think a generically great card that also has build around potential. I think this is a great showcase of why Activate is going to be a very useful sort of tool, and I think Symbiote Spider-Man is going to be a very useful sort of card as well. Moving on here to Scarlet Spider, we got another Activate card, this time a 4/5. Activate add an exact clone of this to another location. And we saw that the exact clone here is not a new Scarlet Spider. It's not like you're going to be able to activate this multiple times or whatever. It's just a clone in number alone. So the goal here would be to scale up your Scarlet Spider's stats. Maybe you play a Forge, maybe you play a Gwynpool, you get this guy stacked up, and then you get to copy that really big stat line. So make this a 4/10, hit that activate button, and boom, you know, you get a second 10 power card here, all for 4 energy. And with the activate in particular, you know, it's really nice because you can say like play that Hulkbuster on turn 6 and still get the copy. You know, as long as you play Hulkbuster first, then you activate your Spider-Man. Going to work out fine. You'd get 2 4/8s in those cases. So even if your buffs come in a little late, you don't have to do this all preemptively necessarily. Just save that activate till the last moment, which can also make it kind of unpredictable for your opponent. Like, where is that power going to go? Sometimes that could be bad for you because you may not be able to influence where that power goes, but you might as well based on where you play things. Like you could fill out a location knowing that you're going to send your Scarlet Spider clone somewhere else. Your opponent won't have that knowledge yet because you're saving this impact until turn 6. So there's some cool little surprise and mind game stuff that's possible because of the delay on this activate. But I will say too, like, I don't think you necessarily have to scale this up to make it good. Like this is just a 4/10 at a base, and it's a 4/10 that's, you know, like spread, not susceptible to like Shang-Chi or anything. So that net output here is pretty nice at a baseline. Also, I guess Cerebro 5 might make a comeback on the backs of these Scarlet Spider copies. So ultimately, I think this card's really good. Like just generically good wide board stats can be helpful. Occasionally, you know, access to locations you might not otherwise be able to get to. And then if you want to build into the scaling side of this, that's an option as well, right? It's just potentially a lot of extra stuff happening here on that Scarlet Spider as you add more of those buffs into the mix. So maybe some decks that just like naturally do that I don't know if you want to go all in on it necessarily, but if you have a couple buffs here and there, that's a possibility for Scarlet Spider to just net extra value that it doesn't necessarily need, but it just offers that little bit of extra oomph occasionally that's possible. So to me, again, I think this looks really good. Just good floor of stats, good high roll potential, and kind of hard to predict and deal with from your opponent's side of things as well, which can be a big advantage for cards. So moving on here to Madam Web. This is getting into the kind of movement side of the cards this month. I think Move could be making a very big comeback. This card also got nerfed a little bit since we saw it initially in the data mining. This was a 2-3 the first time we saw it. Now it's a 2-1, which is certainly an indication that it might have looked pretty powerful in testing. They had to take some numbers off. I think it still looks very powerful. It is an ongoing card. You can move one of your other cards away from here each turn. And the reason this is nuts is it gives you a consistent move engine every single turn, which decks have sometimes struggled with sequencing in these move effects on the right cards and the right times. You know, sometimes your Iron Fist or your Ghost Spiders don't really line up exactly when you need them to. And, you know, sometimes like Doctor Strange is hard to pull off because you don't have the right size stuff on board. Madam Web is a way to say, hey, look, I know if I play stuff behind Madam Web, I'm gonna have the ability to move it super consistently. So I can move, play Madam Web on turn 2, play Vulture on turn 3. I know I'm gonna be able to move that Vulture on a future turn. I'm gonna get at least one activation out of this guaranteed, and then, you know, maybe I Ghost Spider it back, and then I know I have another move possible on that Vulture with this Madam Web. So this just becomes like that super reliable way to guarantee you're going to get these great activations. And I think that gives Move an enormous boost. Like, I think it's just going to feel so much better. Games you hit Madam Web on turn 2 are probably snap games for Move decks now. It's like, I'm just going to absolutely outscale people like crazy because Vulture scales like crazy. Dagger scales like crazy. You know, there's just so many good opportunities. Even like a perfect curve, you know, like Torch on 1, play the Madam Web on top of it, Vulture on turn 3. On turn 3, you're moving your Torch now that the Madam Web has fully resolved on board. So you move the Torch away. Turn 4, you move the Vulture away, right? You can keep playing a card behind, you're making room behind the Madam Web as you go. So you just always just got another one queued up that's going to do something hopefully really cool. I think it's actually even possible to maybe play this in like an old kind of Elsa Angela style deck as well. Like before, you would enable that via your own movement cards. You'd run the Jeffs or the Silks or the Nightcrawlers or whatever. I had Nocturne for a long time there, and you'd play those up and they would be able to move themselves. With Madam Web, you could kind of do the same thing, but with any card. You don't have to run the movement cards, just run awesome 3-drops that have better stats or better effects. Madam Web could sort of set that kind of thing up. I even wonder if there's like Madam Web advantages in just regular decks, just having that flexibility to move things, even if you're not trying to proc movement effects. Just surprise factor, unpredictability could go a little extra angle. Does this go in an ongoing deck as a 2 cost that just gives you surprise factor? I don't know. Or access to, you know, inaccessible locations. There's all kinds of little angles for this. So Move, absolute home run, all-star card. Might make Move top of the meta instantly, I think, because it's just so dramatically good in that archetype. But I wouldn't even totally write this off elsewhere. It does have kind of a small stat line for some of those ideas. Sometimes they may not want to give up their turn 2 for just this sort of utility effect, but I wouldn't write it off either. I think this is a really big effect. So ultimately, Madam Web looks completely busted for Move decks. Even though she got nerfed, I think they're not going to care because there's just so much upside baked into this or that Move game plan. So speaking of Move cards here, next up we have Araña, who was a 2-2 when we initially saw her in the data mining, but now a 1-1, and she reads, activate, give the next card you play +2 power and move it to the right, which seems like such a good movement enabling card. Kind of like our Iron Fists and Ghost Spiders for those 1-cost movement options. This is another one. But that bonus power is very meaningful. We saw a great example in the reveal video of just like turn 1 Araña, play a multiple man on turn 2, your multiple man's already a 2/5 that copies itself into a 2/5. Like, that's crazy to get two 5-power cards right away on turn 2 that, you know, can still be, you know, moved and manipulated later as well. Like, that just seems absolutely crazy already. And then, you know, stuff like Human Torch as well can scale off of this power also. So just like really good for any of those things that duplicate and multiply those stats. But you don't need that. Like, just again, having a targeted movement effect that you activate when you want is so nice. With things like Iron Fist and Ghost Spider, sequencing could get clunky sometimes. You know, even when you master it, they don't always weave into turns right, and it's sometimes hard to use with bigger, higher cost cards. You know, you play this on turn 1, you don't have a turn 2 move. Who cares? It's fine. I'm going to just play Vulture on turn 3, and I know that my Araña's still going to be able to move my Vulture. I'm happy, right? Like, Vulture gets even crazier bigger because of the +2 power, and I just know that I'm kicking things off with that Vulture. Maybe I move the Vulture into the Madam Web location, and then I've got another move queued up right there as well, you know? So there's just so many interesting little options because this is on that activate, and it's, you know, ultimately a 1/3 at a base net output, which is great for 1-cost cards. That +2 can go even further, like we talked about with some of those scalers. So it's just like an A+ card for move. Cheap, flexible, activate when you want, which is such a nice bonus, and that +2 can do some nice things for movement cards as well. So all in all, just A+ little card for move decks. Between this and Madam Web, I think this is just a big recipe for success. So next up here is Silver Sable, moving away from the activate and move stuff a little bit, but another, I think, just really good card. This is a 1/1 on reveal, steal 2 power from the top card of your opponent's deck. That immediately makes this a 1/3 on board, which is already great for a 1-drop. You're pretty happy with that 1/3 stat line, but then it also has that potential to be kind of a 1/5 net output if your opponent wants to play that card off the top. And you know, they're going to draw it. You know, they might want to play it. It might even be something really important for their deck, and it might be something like Iron Man, where they're really sad to have -2 power on that Iron Man. So, you know, the net total power swing on this card is really nice for a 1-drop. The frustration aspect is there as well. On top of that, you know, that can enable some archetypes like Bounce. This becomes a crazy good card in Bounce, because not only are you scaling its stats up with each bounce, but you're additionally hitting extra cards in your opponent's deck, kind of killing their hand with all of these just like really low powered, annoying sort of things. I kind of want to see a toxic bounce with this and Celine, where you just keep playing them together. It's like basically, you know, you play Silver Sable on 1, you wait a turn for them to draw that card. They probably don't play it. Then you Celine and make it even worse, right? And then you bounce them both and just keep going. You can kind of kill 1 card a ton or multiple cards. I don't know if that'd be worth it necessarily, but super fun idea. You don't need Celine though. I think just in a regular bounce deck, this is going to have some really big pop-off potential for its own stats. And then also, you know, just messing with that opponent's stuff, which means you could also play this in those toxic kind of decks. You know, this and like Cassandra Nova together are like just completely melting your opponent's deck. Weave in a Scorpion and then an Ajax later, right? And you've got this kind of cool little deck archetype coming together too that's like purely affliction based. Maybe you make it high evo with Abomination, maybe not, but I think this card becomes really cool in that case. So I see a big home for this in Bounce. I see some angles for like you know, toxic synergy decks of some kind or another. And then I do even wonder if this just gets played in like good card decks. Like, this is just a really good 1-drop. If you're just playing 1-drops in your Angela Tempo deck or whatever, could this take the place of something like the Nebulas of the world, the Nico Minorus of the world, those cards that have just been those flexible 1-drops we play? I think that's a possibility. I actually think this might be in that kind of conversation for certain kinds of decks. So all in all, to me, Silver Sable yet again looks like a really good card. Now, moving on to these next two, this is something a little different, but it was teased that both Hell Cow and Black Swan will be getting the activate keyword instead of the on reveal keyword, and also suggested that these will not be the only cards that it happens to. I don't know the timeline on these, if these are happening immediately with this week, It sounded like they might be coming along a little bit later in like a future patch or OTA or something. But these two were teased. We think these are coming now. I don't know that their stat lines will stay the same. They may get updated stats to match the power of the activate, because I think in both instances activate makes these cards notably stronger. So do keep in mind the numbers might get tweaked, but do also keep in mind these are not the only cards that are going to be changed. A lot of people think like Zabu is going to be changed, and they teased something in a patch note. They had like some plans for Zabu or something, so maybe that's another example. But Hellcow, if he stays this way, is absolutely insane, because number one, 4/8, great stat line. The activate discard here means you don't risk discarding things you don't want to discard. Right now, it's hard to play Hellcow because you might accidentally discard a Hella. You might accidentally discard a MODOK, and it's just really hard to do that. But if you can do it on activate, you can play Hellcow on turn 4. You can play MODOK on turn 5. Then you can activate your Hellcow so that he's only going to hit the Apocalypse or maybe the Swarms in your hand, basically ensuring that his discard happens after MODOK's discard happens, so that you're isolating it to those key targets, scaling up that Apocalypse, scaling up the amount of Swarms in hand, which doesn't necessarily work with like Dracula, because, you know, like you can't play Dracula and Hellcow both on turn 4, but maybe you just slam the really big Apocalypse in that case, as opposed to trying to hit it with Dracula, or maybe you're just trying to ride all those small swarms and ride. Also in Hella decks, you can also wait to use this until you've safely deposited your Hella. So basically wait to use this on turn 6. You do want to use it before Hella reveals, so you activate first, then play Hella, but importantly, no chance of discarding the Hella because she's already been played out. So that's a potentially cool enabler for Hella, while again playing maybe a big stat, again assuming this is going to stay a 4/8, which I could see this getting nerfed to like a 4/6 or something with activate, because it just seems like it'd be really, really good at this level. But essentially discard on a delay just creates a lot of opportunity for how we see discard decks today, and I'm sure I didn't even think of all the greatest examples. And then when it comes to Black Swan here, again, this is a really positive change, because before you had to play that Black Swan at the right moment, often like on turn 5, so you could set up for a big turn 6 with all those cheap 1-cost cards and the Hit Monkey dumping a bunch of surprise, unpredictable power on that final turn. Now you don't have to play the Black Swan on turn 5. You can still just queue her up early on turn 3, set up that activate for that turn 6 dump is still possible, or maybe earlier if you want as well, which gives you more freedom basically in the ensuing turns to play things, bounce things, weave in other game lines, whatever you want to do. There's more possibility because you get to queue her up early. So again, just a lot more flexibility for this sort of effect. I don't know again if she'll stay at a 3/5, but I do think this makes Black Swan a notably better card. So all that said, let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 4 stars. And I guess we'll start with the best, which is going to be important because I think all of these cards are very good. Madam Web is a 4-star card. Araña is a 4-star card. Scarlet Spider is a 4-star card. Symbiote Spider-Man is a 4-star card, and I'm gonna give Silver Sable 3 stars just so that every card's not 4, but I think she's a very good 3-star card. And I guess if we saw Hellcow and Black Swan at these levels, I think Hellcow is an easy 4-star, and Black Swan probably a good 3-star as well in this case. But yeah, there you go. That's the September season. I think potential for big meta disruption with move. I think both of these spider cards have a lot of potential to create homes for themselves as well. So could be potentially a very big month. That said, I'm curious what you guys think about all of these. They're going to be insane, going to be bad. Share those thoughts all down in the comments below. But until then, thanks much for watching. And until next time, game on.